So today I'm going to do another instalment in my now quite long-running series, Revisiting. This is where I look at one particular album which has meant a lot to me over the years. So first instalment of 2023, I thought we would look at this record. This is Joe Jackson and Night and Day. This record goes way back for me. I can see here it was bought from a record shop called Right Track for £3. Now Right Track was a fantastic little record shop in Leeds. I remember buying this record. It would have been in probably about 1994. And the reason I picked it up was that I'd heard the song Stepping Out on the radio. I was driving, it was a long motorway journey, heading back to my old university here in Lancaster to play a gig with my band. And I hadn't been back since I graduated a couple of years before. And it was quite an emotional experience driving towards this place where I'd had so many ups and downs in my life. And, we were heading for a gig, it was a wild rock and roll time, etc, etc, and we were just playing the radio, listening to the radio, and this song came on, Stepping Out. I don't know if I'd heard it already by that point. I'm sure I probably had, because it was such a big song, and it just seemed to completely tap into the vibe that I was experiencing, just that kind of late night motorway journey, a feeling of melancholy mixed with a slight feeling of uplift. And I just loved the song, I loved the arrangement, I loved the way that it had all these little percussive effects in it, little glockenspiels and vibraphones, and the tune was magnificent, and his vocal performance I just thought was extraordinary. And so the next day I went and bought the record. It also reminds me, this record, of the fact that I was working for the first time. I'd got a crappy office job, and I was stuck in this place wearing a shirt and tie every day. I hated it. But I'd come home in the evening and stick on Night and Day by Joe Jackson, and that would cheer me up. So yeah, I thought this would be a nice one to look at. So let me show you my record first of all. So this is it. So this comes from 1982. So I bought it in about 94. So it was already over 10 years old when I bought it, but it's in good condition. I love the gatefold picture of Joe there with his band, looking like they're having fun with lots of musical instruments. You've got the lyrics on the inner there, so nothing special going on for the inner, but you've got a really nice custom label actually with a picture of Joe, white on black on that side, and then black on white on that side. So yes, this record then came out in '82. It was his 5th solo album. So Joe Jackson, he was from Gosport, or he'd grown up there originally. He'd signed to A&M Records and become a bit of a leading light really in British new wave pop music. His big song, his first big hit, was Is She Really Going Out With Him, which had a kind of acerbic quality, not a million miles away from Elvis Costello. And he kind of refined his thing. He was an interesting combination because he came up in that kind of new wave era, and he was quite a spunky songwriter, but he'd also had classical training, and that's obvious when you listen to the record. I guess you could say he's slightly in the same ballpark as Billy Joel in a way, both of them precocious talents with a knack for creating earworm melodies. I was never a big fan of Billy Joel though. I found him a little bit annoying. Joe Jackson didn't seem to have that quality, although he was incredibly precocious and incredibly talented. Very into jazz music, and obviously, a bit later on he was to make full-blown jazz records and, big band stuff, and you can hear that coming through in his music. So Night and Day was his 5th album, came out in June '82 on A&M, and it was easily his biggest album, went top 5 in the UK and the US. In fact, it was his only top 5 album. In the US at least. He may have had another hit album in the UK, I'm not sure. Went gold in the UK. The song Stepping Out was Grammy nominated for Record of the Year and Best Pop Vocal Performance. And the album really was his attempt, I think, to pay tribute to New York and its culture. In fact, for years I assumed that Joe Jackson was an American songwriter, and it was really on the strength of this record. It just seems to have that kind of urban New York kind of sound. I think he's paying homage to all the great classic American songbook writers on this record too, although it's filtered through this kind of nervy new wave sensibility. I mean, there's all kinds of influences on this record. I can hear things like Steely Dan in some of the chord progressions, and just that kind of Duke Ellington finesse that he's got with the, with the harmonies. I can hear a little bit of 10cc coming through maybe, you know, British art rock. Strong dose of Cuban rhythms and kind of Latin rhythms on this record, which is absolutely brilliant, the way he does it. He just fills the record with all these mad instruments, you know. I mean, you can see on that gatefold again just how many instruments he had at his disposal. Lots of percussion, which really appealed to me at the time. Back in the mid-90s, I was playing the drums and I was taking a great interest in any interesting jazz records I could get my hands on. And just in terms of being a pop record, this album is full of incredible rhythms, cross rhythms, kind of jerky Cuban rhythms, Latin stuff going on, just fantastic. It's a bit of a mishmash of stuff really, but it's got a new wave sensibility as well as the classic influences, the Duke Ellington, the Steely Dan, that kind of thing. There's also a bit of David Byrne phrasing coming in, a bit of Thomas Dolby wackiness here and there, and you put it all together and it's a pretty invigorating stew of stuff really. An amazingly creative record. It's one of those albums which I put on just in order to recharge my batteries, in order to give myself a bit of a lift. It just reminds me of how great pop music can be. It's very cinematic. It could almost be, you know, these songs could almost be little movie soundtracks in their own right. So it was co-produced and mixed by David Kirschenbaum and Joe Jackson. Recorded in New York City with his band, with Graham Maybe on bass, Larry Tolfree on drums, timbales and percussion, Sue Hadjopoulos on congas, bongos, timbales, orchestra bells, xylophone, miscellaneous percussion, flute and vocals, and then he has a variety of guests on here too. Joe Jackson obviously plays keyboards. He's a great keyboard whiz. Piano, Fender Rhodes, Yamaha electric pianos, Hammond organ, all sorts of stuff. One of the most diverse albums you'll ever hear in terms of just the huge range of sounds he has going on. So finally, the songwriting. I mean, from a lyrical point of view, this album is absolutely brilliant. It kind of addresses loads of things that were happening in the 80s, but it's also incredibly timeless as well. You know, the song TV Age, which is basically a kind of a portrayal of modern trash culture really, and how we're all glued to the box. There's a lyric here, we don't move, we send out for food, get the news on video. I can prove there's no need for movies, we got HBO. So a definite precursor to the world we live in nowadays. You know, HBO is king, DVD box sets, etc. in the TV age. And you've got a song called Cancer, which just goes, everything gives you cancer, everything gives you cancer, there's no cure, there's no answer, everything gives you cancer. A bit later on, in more modern times, Joe Jackson campaigned against the no smoking ban, and I think he's a bit of an advocate against the nanny state. You know, it's one of his more acerbic political avenues on things. You know, it's not particularly something I've got a great deal of sympathy with, but you know, each to his own. So the album starts off with Another World, which really lays the groundwork for the record. It's got a bit of a Latin vibe to it, lots of stuff going on, lots of churning rhythms, lots of excitement, lots of melodic interest. Chinatown has a kind of pentatonic, as in the black notes on the piano kind of feel, and again, it really kind of raises the roof. There's a lot going on. It's incredibly busy, and there's a bit of a paranoid streak starts to come through in the lyrics. I took a right, then I took a wrong turn. Someone asked me for a quarter. It didn't seem to fit. He didn't look much like a Chinaman. The words are almost sort of reportage. It's almost like he's keeping a diary of what's going on, and you get the sense of somebody just living in a busy city, having lots of encounters and just reporting back on them. And it's a very panoramic kind of cityscape that he's painting. Lots of detail. He's kind of looking down at the city, aerial view, and then he'll just zoom in suddenly on a person or a set of circumstances. And yeah, he's definitely got his own take on it. And you got Target, which is a very kind of nervy, edgy song, shades of Talking Heads, David Byrne coming through. I'm no one special, but any part of town, someone could smile at me, then shake my hand, then gun me down. Almost reminds me of, you know, Miami Vice, or that kind of mid-1980s, those crime dramas that were around in America in the mid-1980s that always portrayed New York as this really dangerous place. Now, Stepping Out, the song, which I've already mentioned, is just one of the most mesmerising pop songs of its era, really. It's a kind of club vibe to it. It's based around a sequence riff that just plays round and round, brilliant bass playing, I love the lyric. I love the just that late night club vibe. It's just so well done. And the lyric, it really evokes images of freedom, of driving off into the city nightscape, and it's very uplifting, but it's got a slightly melancholy undertow to it, which I just, it totally nails my taste in music. That kind of mixture of uplift with melancholy, essentially nails my tastes. Side 2, you got a breakup song called Breaking Us in Two, which again was a single. It didn't do very well. I think it got to, let's have a look, got to number 59, so that was a bit of a flop single. Not my favourite song on the record. It's quite a mainstream song, that, but it's okay. Then you got Cancer, which is just a song about cancer, and it's quite spunky. It's quite acerbic. It's a good track. And then you got this extraordinary song called Real Men, which was a single in Australia, and it's a song that really has a lot of pre-echoes of the sexual politics that we're living through today, really. A song which challenges gender stereotypes. Joe Jackson did eventually come out as being bisexual, but this song is very, very provocative. If you have a kind of conservative view of sexuality and gender, then you're not going to like this song at all. You don't want to sound dumb, don't want to offend, so don't call me a faggot, not unless you're a friend. Then if you're tall and handsome and strong, you can wear the uniform and I could play along. There's a definite sort of kinky quality to it, and he's basically questioning what is a man, what is a woman, and can these genders be blurred, and can we maybe adopt a more fluid interpretation of that kind of thing. Now that is clearly in the news at the moment, big style. There's a lot of that going on. It's quite amazing really the way he seemed to be ahead of the curve in so many ways, writing about things. I guess in the 80s in New York there was a big gay culture going on there, which people like Freddie Mercury tapped into that very clearly. So he was just writing about what he was seeing around him, I guess. And then the album ends with this extraordinary song called A Slow Song, and it just builds into this great cathartic kind of crescendo. I get tired of DJs. Why is it always what he plays? I'm going to push right through. I'm going to tell him to play as a slow song. It's just magnificent, really, really majestic, and just incredibly well done. As is the whole record, really. It's extraordinary that Joe Jackson's career really fell off a cliff shortly after this. Maybe he had another 1 or 2 albums that charted, but then if you look at his discography after that, it just went straight down. One of those artists who I think was in the right place at the right time, had a brief window of being a big major star, and then for whatever reason it just kind of, tailed off. But it's a record I'm hugely fond of, one that will always hold a place in my heart. And if you don't know this record, if you don't know Joe Jackson's music, do check it out. I think you'll enjoy it a lot. So there we go. Hope you enjoyed that video. That was Joe Jackson and Night and Day.